Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful spring morning. Today's topic for our webinar, as I assume you know since you've joined us, is going to be food as fuel. And I just want to take a few minutes to welcome you and to thank a few people who helped put this together. Of course, Ruth Pelletier, who is our event organizer and put this together for us and has, as usual, done a fantastic job. I'm really excited about today's presentation. We're going to be speaking to Crystal Barron today. Crystal's a certified integrated nutrition, health coach, and naturopath. I'll give you a little bit more of her bio in a minute. But we're really, really pleased to have her. She's going to be giving us a little bit of an overview on the idea of food as more than just something to eat. The idea that food is really something that's critical to your health. And while a lot of us sort of know that, obviously, we hear it all the time, the details are a little bit fuzzy and they change. The science of nutrition is ever evolving. And so we're really thrilled to have someone who's at the front line of hearing about some of the new things in nutrition, like food and inflammation, which really wasn't discussed about 10 years ago, but is very important. So as we are sort of in a different software than Zoom, you don't need to worry about turning off your mics or your cameras. We can't actually see each other. I can't even see you, which is a little bit sad. But hello to everybody, our usual guests. I'm really happy you could join us. So now I'm going to turn this in a moment to our guest. Crystal Barron, as I said, is a certified integrative nutrition health coach and naturopath. She specializes in working with people to overcome stress and burnout. She must be very busy right now. But she's made it her mission to educate people on their personal health and wellness journeys. She has over 20 years of corporate leadership experience, as well as multiple years in the personal development field and studying in world-renowned Institute of Integrative Nutrition, where she learned about nutrition, bioindividuality, and how each person's needs on their journey will be different. And I think this is so important. So we're going to be looking at a few different topics today. There are 3 different presentations, and we're going to have a question and answer period after each one. As usual, you can send your questions in the chat, and I'll be asking Crystal. We're also going to have a break where you can, get up and move around and make a cup of tea. And that will happen between 10:55 and 11:05. So without any more pause or further ado, as they say, I'd like to welcome Crystal Barron, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Crystal, welcome. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. That was the warmest welcome. I really appreciate it. I actually want to take a moment to thank Seniors Action Quebec for asking me to be part of this incredible opportunity. The goal for today is really, like Vanessa said, is to really explore things that we already know as foundationally true, but to revisit certain things because there are so many things that change over the course of the days, the months, the years, and especially when it comes to health in today's standards, food as the foundation, food as medicine, food as fuel to be able to get us to that better standard of health when we talk in general. So thank you again. I am going to start by kind of going a little bit more into a bit of who I am. So next slide, please. Perfect. So thank you so very much. So who am I? I'm Crystal. Vanessa did a pretty good introduction of who I am. But I wanted to dive a little bit deeper and just tell you about the human being that's behind here. I actually fell in love with health and nutrition a few years back. And as Vanessa mentioned, I work with people specifically around stress, anxiety, and burnout because that's something that I had lived. And one of the foundations of my healing was food. So, which took me to that next level of being able to do these kinds of presentations today. I'm also an extremely passionate person who loves her family. I love to do any kind of outdoor activities. I love to box. I love to dance. I love to read, and I love to cook. And you'll a lot of the times find me chilling and, just watching TV like the rest of you. So thank you again. I'm Crystal, and I'm going to be your host for today, and I will take you to the next slide. All right, so today's agenda, we are going to be exploring food in a lot of detail, and going into topics, like Vanessa said, that we're familiar with, but we might not necessarily know or understand. We're going to start by taking you on a tour of the grocery store, a beautiful virtual tour about how to look at that awesome place and break down those sections about how we can get the most out of our shopping experience, from everything from the health benefits, but also when we look at our budget. Next, we're going to break down how to read nutrition labels. This is actually a really fun one, and it's one that's actually pretty, most of my clients are pretty confused when they're looking at a nutrition label. We see all kinds of things on the front of the box. We see all kinds of things on the back of the box, but really, how do you break it down to really understand what is happening? Next, we're going to dive into the mysteries between what's the difference between whole foods and processed foods. We're also going to define some of the very misunderstood concepts around organic foods, genetically modified foods, and even taking a look at grass-fed versus grain-fed foods when it comes to your animal products. We're going to talk about the difference between fresh, frozen, and canned foods and how each of them can be actually incorporated into a healthy lifestyle. And then finally, we're going to go and talk a little bit more about that famous thing that Vanessa was talking about, the anti-inflammatory foods that actually exist out there, and how they actually help you to support your body on a holistic level. As she mentioned, this is an interactive workshop where you're able to ask your questions. So please feel free, drop your questions in the comment box. And when we get to the Q&A section, we're going to be able to answer some of those. So we're going to get started. Next slide, please. All right. So you have all been to the grocery store at least once or twice in your life, right? I hope more than once. And most of you guys, for most people that I've spoken to, it could actually be an intimidating experience depending on what your actual situation is. It could be a situation when it comes to money. It could be a situation around when it comes to, just figuring out what the healthy things to eat are. But yes, it's where we get our food, but it's also where we are bombarded with tons of marketing, advertising, and a whole bunch of information overload. I don't know about you, but when I go into a grocery store, the specials are on display. Everything is right in your face. And it's super important to know that there are tactics around that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those tactics. Before we continue on the road to taking a look at the grocery store, I want to make it a point to tell you this. It is always important to be prepared before you walk into a grocery store. And when I talk about being prepared, it outweighs more than just, eating healthy, but we're talking about your budget also. So I mentioned it before, but it's super important to be able to have a good plan when you go in there, especially when you're living on a budget. Most people do their groceries with budgets, but most people don't actually plan ahead. And the planning ahead that I'm talking about are things like, taking a look at your circulars, but more than just taking a look at your circulars, planning the meals that you're going to eat that week. If we have a good foundation of understanding what we're going to be eating for the week, picking out our grocery list from that preparation and that planning is going to make our lives a lot easier when navigating the grocery store. Because it's super easy to go in there and grab 3 of something for $5 when you don't need 3, right? You can buy one for 2 and you're able to pick up some other really good things at the same time. So I want to keep that at the forefront. So now that I've set you up for success to go into your grocery store because you've figured out what you're going to be eating for the week and you figured out how you're going to be eating and how you're going to be putting it together, I want to take you through the trip to the grocery store. So basically, the flyers are super important. So flyers are great for you when you're planning because it gives you a really good insight into what the next, what's going to be on sale, how are you going to be able to hold on to that budget, and how you're going to be able to prepare the meals that you want. So I kind of like to do 2 things. I like to have an idea of the meals that I'm going to be making, but I also like to look at the flyers because that can give me added inspiration. So if you really are looking to be budget conscious, checking out the flyers to be able to create those meals is a lot of fun. So now let's dive in. We're going to have 4 sections to the grocery store tour. We're going to talk about fresh produce. We're going to talk about the perimeter. We're going to talk about bulk foods, and we're going to talk about the aisles. And you're good. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So first, our grocery store tour. Each of the sections in the grocery store, they have their advantages. There are actually really amazing things in each one of the sections. And so I want you to remember that there's not just one that's better than the other. And there's not one that there's a big, huge X on it. But, learning how to navigate them and finding the right things in each one of the sections is going to be what you're going to be looking for. Because again, each section comes with their marketing tactics. When you walk into the grocery store, the first section that you walk into is your produce section. It is by far the most beautiful section of the grocery store because of its bright colors and its textures. When you're making your way through this fresh produce section, what I want you to think about is the colors of the rainbow. When we eat the colors of the rainbow, we're incorporating massive phytonutrients into our body. What's a phytonutrient, you guys ask? They're actually the natural chemicals and compounds that are produced by plants, and they're actually beneficial to our body, packed full of vitamins and minerals and all of that really great goodness that goes into our body when we're eating fresh produce. Phytonutrients also have nutrients that are anti-cancer causing and anti-heart disease components. So the more fresh produce that you get into your body, the better that it is for your overall health. We're not going to talk about that in complete detail today, but just know that there are a lot of things that when you're going to be eating fresh fruits and vegetables, it really supports our health system in general. Fruits and vegetables, like I mentioned, are a huge source of vitamins and minerals. And they're also a really good source of fiber. Fiber, guys, we're not going to talk too much about fiber today, but let me tell you, that gets your body working, and your body needs to work because we need it to go through the processes to expel toxins from our body. And what does that the best? Fiber. The next section of the grocery store is what you're going to call our meats, cheeses, and dairy, meats, cheeses, and grain section, and dairy as well. So it's kind of the perimeter of your store. So the perimeter store is another really, really great section because most of the foods, again, are whole foods. You're going to have all of your good stuff that we all love. I mean, I love cheese just like the rest of you. It's a great section of the store, and it allows us to be able to pick things that are going to be cooked at home. So you will see that these are things like the meats, the eggs, the dairy section, everything you have to basically start preparing it at home. You will get some processed foods in this section, 100%, but we'll talk a little bit more about processed foods a little bit later. And then following the exterior of the store, we have our bulk food section. So this section can actually be hidden in a couple of different spaces within the grocery store. Some grocery stores have it closer to the produce section. Others have it close to the first 2 aisles of your grocery store. It really depends. But this is another really great area where you're going to find foods like grains, seeds, dried foods. It's another option that's full of whole foods for you to eat. You get a lot of quality foods here that don't have a lot of added ingredients. You'll get peanuts, you'll get almonds. Like there's no extra ingredients except for maybe the salts that they put on some of the actual bulk items. But again, once we get to the section when we start talking about the actual reading your labels, you'll kind of get a better understanding of what to go for and what to stray away from. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, we meet the aisles. There are tons of aisles to navigate in a grocery store. What I want you to remember is this. The grocery store aisles are not bad. There's not a big X on it. But what I want you to remember that they are chocked full of processed foods. And it's super important that you understand that processed foods are just that. They have been cooked, they've been canned, they've been heated, they might have been frozen, they might have had changes to their nutritional components in ways that they're trying to fortify the ingredients or even preserve them in very different ways. So again, we're not trying to take away all processed foods from our life. That is not the goal here. Again, it's just to make those healthy choices when we are going into the grocery store. The other thing I will add, that wasn't actually in my notes, but marketing and advertising in the aisles are very heavy. Okay. So oftentimes the bigger brands that have the most money are the ones that are paying for the center line of where your eyes go. And so when you go into a grocery store, you have the opportunity to look directly at your eye level. And oftentimes that eye level is where the majority of the big brands are. It is not necessarily the cheapest. It's not necessarily the best. It's, there are tons of different reasons why they're placed there. But remember this, you have options in every single section of an aisle, and you have choice. Okay, so we'll get to that. We'll get to that soon. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, nutrition labels 101. All right, this is where we start to explore things in a lot more detail. I'm just going to make my slide a little bit bigger. Perfect. So yes, so your nutrition label. Every single packaged food that we purchase will have what we call a nutritional label on the either back, the side. Sometimes it's a little difficult to notice. And even some of the foods that we think are not processed, sometimes they will have nutritional labels that show you that there's a little bit more processing that goes into it. What's important to know is that there are 4 sections to a nutrition label. And the nutrition label is broken down into those 4 sections. The first one is the serving size. The second section is our calories. Third section is the nutrients. And the 4th section is the actual daily value percent. So the daily value percent that is based on recommendations from the FDA. So when we look at the first section, this is our serving size. So what I want us to remember here, serving size doesn't necessarily mean the whole package, okay? This is a huge misconception, and a lot of the companies that are out there, they know that we look at the serving size, and when we look at a serving size, we're like, oh, calories for serving. We think that what we're putting into our body is a good amount of calories for the amount of the serving. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's for the whole package. And so in this example, it's for 1 cup. But I've seen drinks, for example. I've seen those energy drinks. I guess some of those energy drinks that we've seen on the shelves, that there are actually 4 servings per 1 can, and each can basically has 4 servings. That therefore most people don't drink a quarter of a can of any drink. When you eat a small bag of chips, is it the whole bag that you eat, or is it a quarter of the bag that you eat? When we are eating, when we're making a portion of rice, are we eating 1 portion of rice, or are we eating, a quarter or a third of the portion of rice? No. So it's really important that we practice looking at the nutritional labels in a way that's going to teach us that we are getting the right amount, the right idea as to what we're eating. So even if it's a small package, beware, check your serving size. The second area is linked to the calories per serving size. And so I know a lot of people are in the habit of, we're in the habit of counting our calories, and, we're on diets. And it's super important to understand that calories are there for a reason, but not all calories are good calories. Okay. You can have 280 calories of carrots, and you can have 280 calories of chips. They're very different calories. Okay. So again, we'll talk more about it later when we talk about the different types of foods that we're going to be eating. But remember, don't be fooled by the serving size, because the amount of calories that are in there might be more than what you're actually thinking. The third section, nutrients don't necessarily mean nutrition. Okay. A lot of people think, oh, wow, there's a lot of nutritional information here on this package. It's not necessarily that it's nutritious. Okay. Remember that. This is here really to guide us and to tell us the things that are in the actual food and the amount that's actually in there in grams. Even white processed sugar comes with a nutritional label. That doesn't mean that it's nutritious. White sugar, most of you probably have heard that white sugar is not really that good for you. The FDA regulates us to make sure that we have that information out, and it's there as a guideline for us. But it really, I find personally, I find it a little bit I don't know, deceptive in a way, because we look at the nutrition label and we're thinking that there's actually full of nutrients in there. And unfortunately, depending on the food that we're eating, it's not. So lastly, we have the percent recommendation daily value. Okay, what is this? Does anybody know? A lot of people think that, this is the amount that I should be eating. But what's really important is that the FDA basically gives us a standard across the board. This is a standard for the average human being. Now, I would like to say that I'm not average. I don't think Vanessa's average. I think we are all very different. And sort of what I said at the beginning, what Vanessa mentioned at the beginning, we are all bio-individual humans. Averages don't work for everyone. And so it's very important that we understand that, although there are percentages labeled on our nutrition label, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that your body is required the same way that somebody else's is. That being said, we're not carbon copies, so it's super important to take a deeper dive. We're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the ingredients lists. Thank you so much for changing that for me. Now, guys, when we're looking at the ingredients list, you can see here on the right-hand side, we have the ingredients list, and it gives us a whole slew of different things that are in this box. And you will start to see that more and more often on your foods, that you can have upward of maybe 20 things in something that is seemingly, I don't know, simple. We'll go today through a couple of these because I think it's really important to understand what each of these components are and how they're actually not really good for our bodies. So I call it the no ingredients list. I've pulled this up from some sources that really talk about the things that we should not be putting in our bodies. Now, I will say this, Canada is much better than the United States. So if you take a comparison of, let's say, a box of cereal from the United States, I'll give, I don't know, cornflakes. Okay, we'll just cornflakes from the US and cornflakes from Canada. They will have two totally different ingredient list. And then you take that same box and you get the one in Europe. Chances are none of the ingredients that are on the Canadian or the American one are the same. I will say this, that there are different standards across the world. Canada is better than the United States right now, so we're really in a lucky position, but Europe is better than them all. Europe's no-no list is there's over 2,000 different ingredients that are on that list that cannot be put in our food or in any of the products that we put on our body, because our skin, ladies and gentlemen, is the largest organ of our body. So not only what we put in our mouth, but things that we put on our skin, we need to start taking into consideration. That's a topic for another day. Let's talk about the first one, monosodium glutamate, MSG, guys. You've all heard that, when you get that Chinese takeout food, we often have a tendency of getting a headache. Well, you'd be surprised to know that MSG is in a lot of the foods that we eat. And if you start taking a look at like 2 or 3 different boxes of the same thing, one of them will have it, one of them won't have it, the other one will have another version of it. So anytime you see monosodium glutamate or MSG for short, that is something that we want to sort of stay away from. It's an additive actually that is made to enhance flavors. It actually can have some harmful neurological effects. It alters our metabolism and it creates metabolic problems like weight gain and shifts in our endocrine system. So there's tons of studies on that. I did not pull them up for you today because I don't think that this is the time or the place. But just remember, MSG, if it doesn't make our heads feel good, chances are it's not making our bodies feel good. Artificial food coloring. Created by scientists. So you'll see sometimes they're called like yellow number 5 and red number 6 and all of these kinds of things. They're actually chemicals that are added to our food to create color. And there are links in association that cause hyperactivity, and they're also known to be carcinogenic. A lot of our, we have a lot that's going on in our world right now. But, a lot of our children, have hyperactivity, much more than they ever did before. And there is a correlation, there is a direct correlation between the things that children are eating and their behavior. I have personal experience with friends of mine who have changed their children's diets, and the complete difference is almost like night and day. So artificial food colorings are definitely something that we want to start straying away from. Sodium nitrate. It's a preservative that prevents bacteria, and it's used in cured meats, and it's a known carcinogen. So oftentimes we hear about sodium nitrates being put in things like, we talked about the cured meats, but like sausages and stuff. There's a lot of them in there. Good news is there are a lot of options that don't have sodium nitrate in them. We just have to learn how to look out for them. Guar gum is not the worst out of all of the list over here today. Guar gum is actually a thickener, but it can cause stomach issues and irritability of your bowel and digestion system. So, there's not enough information out there about why it causes that yet, because it's still relatively new on the market. But if it's causing you upset in your stomach, chances are you should be staying away from it. High fructose corn syrup. This is literally almost in every single food that we buy that is processed or packaged. It's a sweetener that's made from corn, a sugar called fructose, and it increases weight gain. It causes insulin resistance and inflammation. So for all of you out there who are having issues with your sugar, a lot of people are becoming type 2 diabetics. High fructose corn syrup could likely be the culprit, and that is something that we need to start staying away from. There are multiple different names for this. We can go into that in detail maybe in the Q&A section. But anytime you see something that says high fructose or fructose, just fructose, it's not good. And even just corn syrup. Artificial sweeteners. A lot of people use these for helping in weight loss and insulin regulation, but they're still considered processed, and they're linked to very different side effects. So each one of the different artificial sweeteners have links to different types of known problems. So they do have their positive side, and it's really good for us. But for those of us that are trying to use this in the dieting world, unfortunately, it actually causes a counterbalance because it tricks your body into thinking that it has sugar. And it actually starts to make you crave regular sugar more. So let's just be careful with that one. Carrageenan, it's actually red seaweed. So we would think that it's not that bad because it's coming from the ocean. But what I want you to think about carrageenan is the fact that it comes from 25% of it is coming from degraded carrageenan. It means that it's not coming from areas that are sustainably sourced, and it's also known as a carcinogen. So no reason for it to be put in our food. Sodium benzoate. It's a preservative. It's basically there to help us to keep the food longer. We were having a little off-camera conversation earlier about foods that you leave on your counter for days and somehow they don't get moldy. Don't know how that happens, but technically there's something in there that's causing them to not go bad. And this is actually, when we start putting these things in our body cannot respond to them. They don't know how to act. And so it's been linked to hyperactivity. It's been linked to disorders like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And combined with vitamin C, it converts to benzene, and that can be linked to cancer development. So, we're eating vitamin C, we eat an orange, and we're having things like sodium benzoate. There's a correlation directly with it to cancer-causing materials. Trans fat. There's a lot of talk about trans fat. And it's been slowly but surely going away. We haven't seen that much of it lately, but it still exists. But it has been removed from the generally recognized as safe list. So this is a list that's actually created also by the Food and Drug Association. And unfortunately, generally recognized as safe should be something that we should maybe consider omitting from our life, because why is it just generally considered safe? Like, we don't have enough of the information yet to be able to call it safe. It's been linked to heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. Xanthan gum, it's another additive to give texture. Again, it's not as bad as some of the ones that we've been talking about today, but it can cause digestive issues. Why do we need to add texture to our foods anyway? Like food already has really amazing textures. Artificial flavoring. Again, similar to the artificial food coloring, it's created by scientists in a lab, and it's chemically designed to mimic real flavors. It's not the real flavor. So sometimes you will have, strawberry jam that really doesn't have very much strawberry in there. It's mostly strawberry flavoring, and it's unfortunate. But the chemical flavors are created, and they are known carcinogens. They're not good for our body. There are things that we should never have had in our bodies in the first place. Yeast extract. Again, not the worst, but combined with sugar, it's very similar to MSG, as it causes headaches, it can cause numbness, and it can cause inflammation. I want to just right before I go into we go into the Q&A period. There's also something that I didn't have on this slide, but natural flavors. So it's very funny that recently we have seen. So you see on this document right here, it says natural and artificial flavor. Oftentimes people think that natural flavor really means that it's coming from the actual fruit or the vegetable or the chicken or whatever it is that we're eating. But unfortunately, it goes through a processing, which means that they take the flavor out of the food, they manipulate it, and they put it back in. So it's coming from a version of a natural flavor, but again, it's processed. So again, it goes back to the saying is that why are we altering the flavors of the foods that we're eating? Is it really to just get the good quality taste, or is it really to get the actual good quality for our body? And with that, I will bring us into our first Q&A section.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Crystal, everyone, we're good?
I hear you.
All right, great. So thank you to everyone who took the time to send in questions. Crystal, thank you. That was super interesting. I'd never really thought about the mapping of a grocery store in the way you presented it. And it's so clever. It's such a smart way to maybe avoid some of those marketing traps, which we all know are, really clever and really well placed. So I'll go into a couple of the questions. This one I think is really important and should be brought up. And that's, I find that the cost of fresh fruits and vegetables is really high. How can I reduce my cost if I'm on a budget?
Very, very good. Okay, sorry, you froze for a second and I don't know if it was me.
No, I think you're good.
Okay, perfect. So that is a really, really good question. Again, I will go back to this. Maybe I didn't, I think I didn't go too in detail with this one enough. Planning. Planning is super, super important. I love having recipes that I go to regularly. So I often have a tendency of, repeating the same things over and over again. And so when we actually have that planned out, it gives us the opportunity to really structure what we're going to be making. I've often actually during the pandemic, believe it or not, I found that my grocery store shopping has actually been made a lot easier because we have to plan a lot more. And so there's a couple of things. There's planning. There is mapping out your grocery store and really going in and getting what you need and not being like constantly bombarded by the barrage of things that are around us. And then finally, this is a great one, and we're going to talk about it later, but canned fruits and vegetables and frozen. So I will definitely say frozen is up there on the list of 100%. This needs to be added to your list. And even canned. But again, when we're talking about canned, let's go back to looking at those nutritional ingredients on the back. We don't want to have too many preservatives in there. We know that there will be some preservatives in there, but there are different ways to preserve things without all of the added chemicals. So we'll be talking about frozen foods later, but that's definitely a good one. The other thing that I will say is that the price might be high, but if we wash our fruits and vegetables when we get them, when we come home, and this is something that I've started doing because of the pandemic, and I have seen a significant increase in the lifespan of my fruits and veg that are fresh. Instead of washing them before I eat them, I bring them home and I give them a bath in nice cold bath. I throw all of the vegetables in the sink, cold bath with baking soda, and I let it sit in there for maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes. I go about doing the rest of my stuff and rinse it off, let it dry air. My fruits and vegetables have not been going bad.
Really?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Any
You know,
theories as to why?
because one, there's bacteria that lands on the food that's in the grocery store. So people walk in the grocery store, we touch things. So there are bacteria on our hands, there's bacteria in the air. There are also like things that are put on the fruits and vegetables to actually make them look pretty. And so when we bring them home and we put them directly in the fridge, they're actually degrading because of the bacteria that's surrounded on them. And so by putting them in the sink and washing them off right away, you're getting rid of that added bacteria that has the opportunity to eat away at the foods that you're putting in there. Try it with a cucumber. I don't know how many times I used to lose cucumbers after 2 days. I've had cucumbers now that have lasted like 6 or 7 days in my fridge.
That's such a great tip. I mean, baking soda.
Yeah.
Would have never occurred to me.
Yeah, I use baking soda or lemon.
Or lemon. Okay, that's great
Yeah.
to know. Here's another one that I think is on, well, I won't say everybody's mind, but that does come up when we're talking about nutrition all the time. And it is, what about deli meats? Deli meats, those rotisserie chickens, all of those kind of convenience meats in the grocery store. What's the lowdown on that?
Okay, so I have a lifestyle choice that I've been living for myself, and a lifestyle choice that I have, been helping my clients with. But it's an 80-20 rule, or a 90-10, really depends on the school of thought that you come from. But deli meats, ladies and gentlemen, we talked about sodium nitrate before in the no list. It's a known carcinogen, and unfortunately, deli meats are kind of in that category of let's try to avoid them more than we would expect. They're convenient, yes, but there are ways for us to be able to do these. We all love ham. We can buy ham and we can cook it ourselves at home, and we won't have all of the nitrates that are put in it. We could freeze it. We can slice them up. I mean, I don't know about you, but turkey is really good in the freezer. So we could prepare it for ourselves and we can have those meats. I know it's more convenient, but it's really not the best. But again, 80-20. If you're telling me that you eat it every single day of the week, that would be something that I would say, hey, we need to maybe start taking a look at it a little bit more in detail and find opportunities for you to substitute it with something that's going to be a little bit more food conscious. But I will tell you this, I've found bacon without sodium nitrate. So there are ways to do certain foods. You might find yourself spending a little bit more money on this one particular product. But once you start to do that, you're going to start to see the difference in your body. And if we go back to the whole planning and preparing, we're going to actually be able to get it into our budget. I really want to talk about budget because it's super important, because I know a lot of people are worried about their bottom line, right? Like, we're making less money. We might be in our retirement years. We might be on a pension. And so the income is not unlimited. And so when you are doing that planning before you go into the grocery store, you're able to slowly but surely start picking and choosing the things that you want to, get better quality of. And this way still have the good foods in your life, the ones that have the less processed information. But again, I would definitely try to slowly but surely stray away, especially from the ones that are heavily processed. We talked about earlier, mock chicken. If it says mock, it means that it's not chicken. What really is it? And unfortunately, even if you're buying it at the deli counter, it's being sliced for us. We don't have the opportunity to look at the actual ingredients list and how it was processed. Things like bologna, it's mechanically separated multiple parts of multiple things. And unfortunately, it's not good for our bodies. Like, we don't know what it's in there. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later when we talk about mood. But guys, everything that you put into your body, it has a physiological reaction to the rest of your body. You put it into your gut, it affects your brain, it affects your behavior, it affects everything and how you're feeling. And so, trying to eliminate those things from your diet is much it's much appreciated. For your body appreciates it a lot. And the other thing that you just mentioned was the prepared chickens. I mean, they're super great, but we don't know what kind of spices are being put on there. It's unfortunate, but they could be using monosodium glutamate. They can be using spices that have additional preservatives in there. And also, we don't know how long the chicken's been there. So, oftentimes, and this is what I've heard before in the past, I am not a professional when it comes to that. I don't know that. I've never done one of those undercover grocery experiments where I go work in a grocery store to see how long the chicken's been there. But I've heard some stories about how those are the chickens that are basically, that have 1 day left to live. So
yeah,
do we want to be putting it in our body?
Yeah, I guess that's the question it comes down to. This is a good question and quite interesting. So stevia is touted as natural. Is it?
No. So this is a very good question. Stevia is a natural byproduct of a plant. Okay, so there's a stevia plant out there that exists that is a natural sweetener. What's important to remember is that it does undergo processing. Okay, processing. Now, if you are going to pick between stevia, because at low calorie sweeteners, because you want to be conscious of that, you might be a diabetic, you might be having some weight loss issues, going the route of stevia would be the better option. Okay, so you'll see in the next section, we're going to be talking about whole foods and processed foods, and there's different levels to processed foods, but stevia would be one of them on the processed foods that are okay for us when we're putting them in comparison to the Sweet and Lows or the Sugar Twins or some of the other ones. I think there's like 2 or 3 different other brands that are out there.
Okay,
that are based out of chemicals.
That's good for people to know. And then someone else asked about nutritional yeast, because I know you had on your no list a mention of yeast. So what about nutritional yeast?
So nutritional yeast, I haven't done a lot of studies on it, but I personally incorporate it into my diet. I'm pretty much plant-based, and so I use that as a substitute for cheese when I'm putting it on pastas and stuff like that. Again, it depends on how it's processed. So there are different versions. You can get nutritional yeast at Bulk Barn, for example, but you can also get it from the health food store. So taking a look at the ingredients and how it's actually processed is also another way to do it. But it's not the same type of yeast. That the yeast extract that's in there really is meant to it's meant as a preservative, and it's not the same as the yeast, the nutritional yeast.
Okay, one last one before we go into your next section. But someone was asking, when adding baking soda or lemon juice to your vegetable bath, what are the proportions that you use? What would you recommend?
Oh wow, that's a good one. I'm an Italian, guys. You see, I talk with my hands. I do everything like this. I do everything by eye. So I kind of I make sure that my water is covering my fruits and my vegetables, and then I sprinkle right over the top a pretty decent amount. So if you have your box that's like this, I would say maybe, I don't know, like a tenth of the box, maybe like 2 or 3 heaping teaspoons or something.
Like half a cup.
Yeah, I don't know. No, like a pretty decent size. So you want to be able to see it kind of hover over the top of your fruits and vegetables and just let it sit in there. But the baking soda breaks down the grime and the dirt. And you can use lemon, so you can use the juice of a half a lemon. I actually purchase at the health food store. It's not the real lemon or the real lime. It's actually another product. I wish I was able to go run in my kitchen and go get it for you guys now. But it's actually 100% lemon juice. There's nothing but organic lemons in there. So I use that. I use about 2 or 3 tablespoons, probably the equivalent about of a half to a full lemon. But I find that I like the baking soda, to be totally honest with you. I've really enjoyed using it, and I find that it really it helps to clean off the vegetables really well.
Yeah, it's probably less expensive as well when you're thinking about it. Baking soda or baking soda at the Bulk Barn versus, organic lemon juice. I mean, that's a different
I
different
know,
price
exactly.
bracket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would personally, that's why I always it's kind of my go-to when I talk about how to clean my vegetables. A lot of people bring up the lemon, but I'm more of a fan of the baking soda. One, it's a low-cost option. Everybody has Cow Brand sitting in their fridge or in their cupboard or in their bathroom for their cleaning purposes. So why not just shoot a little bit in there and
Yeah. No, I think
enjoy?
it's a great tip. Again, thank you for that.
You're
Okay,
very
so thank you
welcome.
for everyone who sent in their questions. Apologies if we didn't get to everybody. There were a few that, we'll either try to work it in later on, or hope that it's covered by one of the future presentations, or part of the presentation, I should say. So we're going to move into the second part of the presentation. And this is really important. I think there's a lot of confusion around this. A lot of these words are thrown around and we don't necessarily know exactly what they mean. And that's so the differences between whole and processed foods, organic, non-GMO, grain, and grass-fed options. I mean, that's a pretty wide spectrum, but what are the value to some of these new things? Is this just marketing? Is it really better for you? So Crystal, thank you for, demystifying some of this for us.
Okay, you're gonna geek me out now. This is where I go kind of like this is my space. This is where I really enjoy talking about I enjoy talking about this 100%. So we're gonna get excited here. The next section, we are going to be going into a couple of things that we started to talk about when we were looking at the grocery store chart earlier. Like Vanessa said, we're going to be talking about whole foods versus processed foods, fresh food versus frozen versus canned, organic, non-GMO, everything else in between there, grass-fed, grain-fed, and everything else. So I want to talk a little bit and let's map out the definitions together. And I'm sure you guys are going to have tons of questions. Maybe I'll be able to demystify some of the stuff before we go. So we're going to talk about whole foods versus processed foods to start. Why is this so important? Simply put, guys, whole foods are foods that are neither processed or processed very minimally. So like I mentioned before, we talked about stevia. Yes, it's a processed food, but it's processed minimally to be able to allow us to actually eat it. There's some other examples of other minimally processed foods: grains, rice, wheat, even some of the fresh fruits. Some of the fresh fruits, they have to go through and undergo a certain processing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, whole foods is nothing added, nothing removed. Essentially, the difference between the two foods is that one of them hasn't been altered before you take it home. So fresh fruits and vegetables, they haven't been altered. They go into your grocery store, they sit there, and they're ready for you to pick up and eat. Processed foods come in a bunch of different varieties, from heavily processed foods to lightly processed foods. And so when we were talking about the grocery store earlier, we talked about the perimeter, there's the perimeter and there's the entrance to your grocery store. So you have your whole foods, then you have the perimeter where you have your dairy and all that kind of stuff. But when you start to go into the frozen food section and into the aisles, this is where you get the heavily processed foods. We talked a little bit about stevia, but I wanted to talk also about something like tofu. Okay, so tofu is actually really good for you, but it does undergo processing for us to be able to eat it, to be able to get those nutrients in our body. Tofu is derived from the soybean plant. So you can get soybeans, you can eat soybeans, but if you actually wanted to make your own tofu at home, it would take you hours and hours, maybe if not days. Like there's a whole process where it's dried first. Then it's soaked in water again. It's crushed and it's boiled. And then they do what they call like separating the curds and whey. A lot of you might remember that from like eating her curds and whey. The Little Miss Muffet. Yes, Little Miss Muffet. That's it. And so, it has to go through this process for you to be able to eat it. But believe it or not, the amount of nutrients that are found in the protein alone in tofu is incredible for you. If you're looking to be substituting some of those highly processed meats, tofu is a good alternative. Heavily processed foods, you're going to be finding those in a lot of them in the frozen food section. So we kind of talked a little bit about it before, but things that are already pre-cooked, processed, frozen, ready-made meals. I mean, I can tell you that during my whole teenage and early adult years, those Michelina's dinners were what I was bringing with me to lunch because I thought that they were a healthier alternative, to certain things. So until we actually really know what we're putting in our bodies, you don't know what you don't know. Okay. So just remember this. If it has ingredient lists on it, chances are it's processed. Let's go through those ingredients lists and start learning how heavily processed things are. And I didn't mention this earlier, but the less ingredients that you have on something, the better it is. I have personally found when I've gone through the aisles and I'm picking and choosing, we'll take a can of corn, for example, because we all enjoy corn. So if you pick the brand of corn that's right in your face, chances are there might be about 4 or 5 ingredients in that can of corn. Salt, water, the corn, plus maybe 2 or 3 different preservatives in there. The same can of corn, maybe from the no-name brand value, if you look at that, the ingredients list is different. You will be able to find one that has less ingredients, which is better for your health. Okay. So again, when we're taking this opportunity, take the opportunity to really learn how to look at the labels. Next, guys, this is where we start talking about organic, GMO, non-GMO. Is it a fad? Is it really good for you? Marketing is marketing. Okay. I want you guys to remember that. Every single company has a marketing department. There is not one good or bad company that doesn't have a marketing brand that's behind them pushing their products because they want people to go out and buy them. What's important to remember is that organic is traditionally better than non-organic. Non-GMO is technically better for us because it's not genetically modified. But you could still go into the frozen food section and find something that says organic and non-GMO, and it still has 30 ingredients and it's been processed. Does that make it good? The answer is no. The answer is that we could be finding something that's going to be better for us. We might be able to make the same meal at home for a fraction of the physical cost that would cost us on our bodies. Okay. So we're going to talk about these 3 things now in more detail. We're going to start with organic. Let's go with organic. So the term organic, guys, was created to regulate the production of food without the use of chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, or any other artificial agents. Eating foods that have trace amounts of these contaminants is one thing. But the problem that we're having right now with the foods that we're eating is that it's no longer trace amounts in our foods. It has turned out that it's in our plants. It's in our soil. So the soils are contaminated. Therefore, it's going into the plants. And so we can't wash the bad stuff off. When industrial farming techniques are in place, not only are we spraying our crops, but we're spraying the soil and potentially killing all of the living organisms that are in the earth that allow us to grow food. I'm going to take a little side note over here. If you are interested in the earth and you're interested in learning more about food and the soil, I want you to watch a series called The Need to Grow. And it's basically telling us that 60% of our soil is no longer consumable. We're talking worldwide here. This is very sad. So it's something that we all need to start being more conscious about. Let's go and not go crazy here. I don't want you to start deciding that you're only going to buy organic forever. We can't do that. There are things it could make it a little bit complicated, especially when taking your first steps in a health journey. I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to probably say it another 10 times throughout this presentation. Small steps, big wins. I want you to start taking small steps in the right directions. And so if you've never really looked at organic food and how to incorporate it in your life, this is kind of one of the things that I want us to start to do. So the Environmental Working Group, it's a group that is basically their mission is essentially to help to empower people to live healthier lives. And every single year, they come up they come up with a list of what you call the dirty dozen and the clean 15 group. And so the dirty dozen is basically a list of 12 foods in that current particular year that they, even if it is grown organically, they tell us that, you know, they could possibly have trace amounts, or that we should be consuming organic only because of the way that they're porous. So for example, strawberries are one of the things that we would want to be having in our day-to-day as organic. We want organic strawberries in there because it's a very porous material. It absorbs everything. And so if we are taking them as non-organic, unfortunately, they're really absorbing absolutely everything that we're putting in them. So I welcome you to go to the ewg.org. I don't know if we have a way to put that in the chat at one point. I'm not sure, but the Environmental Working Group, they're phenomenal. They've got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the things over here that we're talking about today. So that is definitely a good one. But they also talk about the Clean 15. So the Clean 15 is a list of produce that you don't have to buy organic, because it is a hardy vegetable. It doesn't take on the pesticides, herbicides, and all of the bad chemicals. And so it gives you guys the opportunity to pick and choose some of the things that you guys are putting into your bodies, and choosing the ones that you want to incorporate organic or non-organic. So yeah, I welcome you to go take a look at the EWG site. I think it's going to be fun for everybody to go take a look. And every year they come out with a new, that new list of 12 and the new list of 15. And so it's refreshed all the time, and it gives you more details as to why each one of those particular produce items are or not good to have organic. Okay. Non-GMO. GMO is short for genetically modified organism, or God's move over. So a lot of us, when we I like to say God move over, because it's basically man-made. Genetically modified means that it was taken, it was genetically engineered by science. GMOs were created by the industrial agriculture industry, and they're there to help us create more and more crops that are resistant to herbicides, bugs, and they can act as literally an insecticide. So completely different than the organics. These are seeds that were created to resist pests and and weeds and stuff like that. Like it's something doesn't make sense. It's how is it produced that it's going to resist that? So there's something to be said about the science behind it. There are scientists that swear by it, but then there are other scientists that definitely don't swear by it anymore. So it's really important to think about that when we are choosing our foods. Again, like I mentioned earlier, just because it says non-GMO does not mean that it's actually a good food choice. It just means that it is produced without any genetically modified organisms. So it's very important that I personally would choose to not incorporate genetically modified organisms into my body, specifically because we don't know the long-term effects. Then we go into grass-fed. So grass-fed animals and free-range meats are also another way for us to help to decide on the quality of the food that we're eating. So there's still a lot of people out there that are eating meats. One of the things that I will say, the animals are more nutritious when they're eating foods that their bodies are meant to be eating. Cows graze, chickens graze on the land, they eat off the land. They were not meant to be eating foods that industrialized agriculture has created for them. And so having the animals have the ability to be able to eat in their natural habitat creates animals that are healthier. Unfortunately, the way that subsidies for industrial agriculture has been created, it makes meats and produce that are grass-fed and free range more expensive, because unfortunately they're not receiving grants from the government the same way that industrial agriculture is. So on a final note, An animal that we eat that has had a beautiful life, we're taking in that beautiful life into our body. Okay. An animal that doesn't have a beautiful life, that has been raised in captivity, that has been raised in a way that is not humane, it has the same consequence that it goes into our body. There are studies that prove it. I don't have them here, but if you really look into it more in detail, making the choice on how your animals are being treated really does affect your physical body. Next, we're going to go into our next slide, please. Fresh versus frozen versus canned. All right. As you can see, guys, fresh is best, canned is good, and frozen is better. There's a number of reasons why I like to say this with people because, you know, going back to kind of what we talked about earlier, fresh is great. It's amazing. But if we're not in season, let me tell you, celery at $4.99 is really not my idea of a good time. Or Brussels sprouts when they're, you know, when you get a pack of maybe 5 or 6 Brussels sprouts for like $8, it doesn't make any sense. And so it's super important that you know that yes, fresh is great. But let's also start thinking about eating within the seasons, right? Like in the wintertime, we're not getting fresh strawberries, right? They're not produced here. So realistically, our bodies, you know, can't get the nutrients that it needs. So going with frozen can be better. The reason why I say frozen is better is because most of the time the fruit or the vegetable is picked and cultivated and immediately flash frozen so that it packs all of the nutritional benefits of the fresh produce. It's actually better because it hasn't had the time to go from the actual farm into the trucks, into the planes, back into the trucks, and take its trip to the grocery store. So right during that period of time, it actually takes time for our produce to get to the grocery store. And so believe it or not, frozen a lot of the times is better quality and it packs a lot of the nutritional benefits. We can also save a lot of money this way. And so saving money, we talked about it at the beginning. If we're on a budget, having frozen foods in our house, it's actually really good for us. One, from a health standpoint, again, make sure that you take a look at the ingredients list. You will find some frozen fruits with a couple of ingredients in there. And you'll find others with 0 ingredients in there, 0 preserving ingredients, which is basically means that they've been flash frozen, put in a bag, and then brought to your grocery store. Those are the ones that you're going to want. Same thing for canned foods. Canned foods are great. But again, because we've had the opportunity today to really take a look at those ingredients lists, the ingredients list and the nutritional facts, guys, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And today you are putting all of this knowledge together to be able to make those choices when you're picking up your canned food. So again, another way to go ahead and get yourself the best out of pretty much all of the worlds. And finally, actually, I think that's pretty much it for me on this slide. We'll go to the next slide, and I think that's bringing us a couple of minutes early to our Q&A period.
Great. Thank you for that. I mean, I think that's so important. And I think that things like organic, you know, is sort of talked about, but not necessarily always understood. So thank you for clarifying some of that. This is an interesting question somebody sent in. Your thoughts on the wax that is put on fruits and veg at the store. Is that safe? Is that something that people should be really trying to remove? What do you think about that?
So when we wash our produce, we have a lot of opportunity to get that wax off. Okay. So guys, you know, there are actually soaps out there that exist for things that are put on our food. So the wax particularly that's put on especially apples, because we're not even peeling the apple. We're just putting that baby right in our mouth, right? So there are actually soaps out there that exist. So I'm not a big apple eater in my house. So I haven't really had to wash them per se, but yeah, 100% you're going to want to wash them lukewarm water because the wax will dissolve in the warmth. So similar to a candle, it'll actually come off in your water. So it doesn't have to be hot water. I wouldn't do that to your fruits, because then you're basically cooking your apples. That's not the point here. So lukewarm water, so you have a little bit of warmth in there. You can get yourself a food grade soap, and let it sit in there, and you're going to see slowly but surely all of the sediments will rise to the top. So yes, you need to get rid of the wax. Don't eat the wax, please.
And the baking soda bath won't do it. You really need to go in with a soap.
I go in with a soap. They're pretty inexpensive. You can go into, any IGA now will have a health food aisle. Believe it or not, now Maxis have health food aisles, and slowly but surely, so do Super C's, and other small grocery chains will have an area that their cleaning products. In the health food section, you can find food grade soap. If you don't want to do that either, at the end of the day, you're still rewashing them. Like, I'm not keeping soap on my food either way. I'm going to re-rinse my food. So I've, in the past, because I don't have the food grade soap, I've used a dash of dish soap. A dash of dish soap in my water. It takes it all up, and then I rinse off all of my food again in the bath.
Okay. I've heard, and this is an interesting one because I've heard people say this to me, that they won't buy organic because there's some idea that they go off faster than vegetables that have gone through the process of having preservatives or whatever it is, the chemicals they believe keeps the vegetables lasting longer. Is there any truth to that?
So I'm going to be honest. I have not done research on that. But what I will tell you is that about 75% of the fruits and the vegetables that I choose to eat in my home, they last just as long as the other stuff that are organic. So I use about 75% of my fruits and my vegetables are organic. And as I said, I wash them in my bath, in my beautiful bath. And I have not lost any fruits and vegetables in the last year since I started doing that. And this all coming out of the pandemic, right? Because people touch things at the grocery store. And now with COVID-19, we need to be more conscious of the things that we're touching, and putting on our bodies and being exposed to. And so there's definitely something to be said about washing the stuff before it goes to the grocery store. The fact that it goes bad because it's organic, I personally don't believe that. And for those of you who do believe it, do we really want to be putting the chemicals in our body that are preserving these fruits and vegetables? Because if they are genetically modified to live longer and to be cultivated for longer, what's it doing to our body? Essentially, when we come into the next section, we're going to be talking about how food alters our mood, how inflammation can happen. A lot of the foods that we're putting in our body, because they've been altered, are causing us a panoply of additional health concerns. And so I would say buy less fruits and vegetables, but buy them organic so that they live, if that's what, is happening to theirs.
Okay. Well, and maybe the baking
that was a
soda
good
bath
question.
tip. Yeah.
That was a really good, yes, baking soda bath. I'm telling you, like 75% of I kind of, again, go by the 80-20 rule in my life. Like 20% of the stuff that I eat is not totally clean. Like, I have my junk food, my soul food, just like everybody else does. And so when we're looking at that, like, we can manage to bring that into our lives.
So here's a question about maybe you can highlight some of the processed foods that people use regularly that they maybe don't think about the fact that this is highly processed and perhaps not the best thing for them. Because let's be honest, so much of our food behavior is habit. We've been doing it over and over. Certain things I think we honestly do without giving it much thought. Are there particular things that you want to highlight for the audience that they should really maybe rethink?
So one of the things that I'd actually like to bring up, that's a great question. Bread. Let's talk about bread. Okay. There's so many different, there's a whole aisle for bread, guys, a whole aisle. And some of them are really good breads. Some of them are not so good breads, but oftentimes, that Wonder Bread or that beautiful white enriched bread that we see, That's one of the ones that are really pretty bad for us. They are usually packed with a lot of sugars. They've been linked to heart disease, diabetes. There's not a lot of nutritional value in there. You know, white flour is processed to the hilt. Like, it's bleached most of the time. And so that, again, is something that's going inside your body, causing endocrine disrupting. It's disrupting our nervous system. So oftentimes it's nice and mushy, tastes good, or we think it tastes good, but it's also laced with a lot of really bad things. And chances are there's probably an ingredients list about the size of your arm on that bread. And so this is kind of one for me that I would definitely suggest making choices with the white bread. That being said, however, there are still white breads that are actually good, like better choices, right? It might not be the Wonder Bread, but it might be the bread that's made with flour, water, and baking soda, I think it is. There's one bread that I've actually seen. It's a white bread that's it's not at Costco. It's anyway, it's one of the brands here in Quebec, Première Moisson. It's a white bread. It's made by Première Moisson. There's 3 ingredients in it. And it will go bad within 4 days if you haven't eaten your loaf. So there's something to be said about it. There's no preservatives in there. There's no sugar in there. The only thing that is probably questionable is the fact that it's only white flour that's used. But at the end of the day, we have choices. So when we are picking the breads, I welcome you. This is something that I started to do in my life when I started to make the shift, to start trying out different breads, because we're used to, we only know what we know, right? We kind of get stuck in our little way of doing things. And I personally used to eat the same bread all the time. And then when I started to realize that the ingredients list were maybe less than, I started to pick and choose. So once I started trying with one and see if I liked that bread, there's tons of them out there that you can find that you'll probably like better than the white bread. So I implore you, please try things out, try new things and see how you like them, because you'd be surprised.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think that so many of us do eat out of habit. We eat the same things that we normally eat. We don't give it a lot of thought. And I think after listening to you today, well, I hope after listening to you today, some of us might take a few more minutes at the grocery store and kind of have a look at those things you just kind of throw in the cart without giving it much thought, because you know, over time, it makes a huge difference. Yeah, so that's great. Here we go. I've got one last one, and then I think we'll send everyone off to break. And that is, hold on. If we do decide to eliminate or reduce processed foods, where do you start?
Haha, that's a very good one. So I'm going to say it again. Small steps, big wins. I would suggest starting really small, taking a look at the things that you eat during the week, maybe going to look inside your freezer, going to look inside your fridge, taking a look at the things that you have in there that are more packaged and more processed. And slowly but surely pick one thing. See if you could pick that one thing and maybe reproduce it yourself in a way that's done at home. Make cooking maybe part of your self-care. We're not talking about self-care today, but I'm probably a big queen of self-care. And I talk a lot about how making everyday activities into like daily things that you do every single day into moments of self-care. So whether it's creating that Chinese food recipe that you would normally buy at the Chinese store or buy in the frozen food section in the Chinese section, taking that moment of self-care and maybe recreating it yourself and using ingredients that you're specifically curating, that you know where they're coming from. I would not suggest starting with everything. Today we've talked about a lot of things. So I would pick just one thing to start today. Slowly but surely build it into your habit base. And then as you move along in your journey, pick something else. Keep adding to it, because once you start with the habit of incorporating healthier alternatives into your lifestyle, it actually becomes a snowball effect. And not only just a snowball effect for you, but it happens to everybody that's around you. I accidentally made everybody in my house plant-based by accident because I started cooking plant-based. And we're talking about 9 months later, and we don't have any meat left in the house. So again, people around you, you become the product of the people that are around you. And so you're capable of becoming the product that is around other people as well. And so by you starting this trend, it will get everybody on board slowly but surely. And over time, it really, really makes big change.
Yeah, I think that's important that people don't, well, a few things. Don't get overwhelmed by watching this video
Oh,
or being in this webinar and then changing everything you do, because that's really difficult to sustain.
mhm.
And small changes have huge impact, huge, as you said. Like do one or two little things, and it can really make a big difference, I think, in someone's health. And it can motivate change to continue instead of in 3 weeks you're like, oh my God, this is costing more money, taking more time, I don't like this, or whatever the problem is. Yeah, and the golden 80-20 rule, be good 80% of the time. I think that really applies to
Yeah,
everything else, not just food, but that's another
it
that's another
literally,
webinar.
but it really does, Vanessa. It really does. And it's funny because I started talking about it more when it came to food, but I realized that it happens for absolutely everything that you're doing, like working out, like living that healthy lifestyle, whatever it may be. And then you no longer start to associate that 20% with negativity. And so that's the other thing that we haven't talked about it, but, and I don't really talk too much about it in the next section, but when we look at our food as something negative, it no longer becomes positive when we're eating it. So if we keep thinking about that cheat meal, what is the word cheat? It's a negative connotation surrounding the food that you're eating. Why does it have to be a cheat? Why can't it be just something that we eat to enjoy in our hearts and our souls? And then when we do eat it, it actually nourishes us in a different way than if it was physically being put into us like a good food. It's nourishing our soul. It's nourishing the way that we're feeling. And so that 20%, we really still need to nourish that 20%. We need to maintain it as something that's actually part of our life source.
Yeah, I love that idea that soul food is not necessarily to, feed your body, it's to feed your soul. I think it's,
Mm.
that's what cookies are for, let's be honest.
It's true. It's true. I'm not gonna lie. I have my ice cream in the fridge. It might not be organic and non-GMO and all that, but I still enjoy my ice cream. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
stop,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna have it every single day.
Yeah.
Not what I do.
Yeah, balances. Okay, I'm going to let
Exactly.
everyone, we're a few minutes early for our break, but that's okay. So everybody we're going to give a 10-minute break now so everyone can go to the washroom, make a cup of tea, do as you wish. And then we're going to come back and talk about a few things that are really important and fascinating. And this is how food can impact your mood. And this is also some of the science around inflammation and food. And this is something that I find really interesting. And again, the science around this is changing by the year. It's really interesting. The impact that food has, not just on your weight, but on how you feel. I've even seen studies that food can impact the decisions you make, your mental health. I mean, this is huge and really important. So I hope you all come back and join us again. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. And that's going to be at 10:57 to be super specific. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had a nice break and that you've got your coffee or your tea in front of you and that you're ready to do our last part of our presentation. I just want to remind you that if questions do come up for you during the presentation, you're welcome to write them in the chat and we will get them. And we'll get to as many as we can during the question and answer period after Crystal's presentation. So Crystal's joining us again, and this section she's going to be talking to us about anti-inflammatory foods, why they're important, what does that even mean, and also how food can impact your mood. I think that there's not enough discussion around this, and it's really important. So Crystal, welcome. Thank you again, and I look forward to hearing this part.
Thank you so much again for that awesome introduction. And again, this is another section for me that's like I'm super passionate about because the foundation of what I do is focused around mood. I'm a coach that specializes in stress and anxiety. And foundationally, food is at the source of every single thing that we do. And so when we're talking today about inflammation, guys, what is that? we have all had periods of inflammation in our lives that we're aware of, and others times that we were not aware of. When you had that stomach ache, that's probably inflammation. When your arthritis is flaring up, that's considered inflammation. When you have a headache, even some chronic illnesses, did you ever really think that they could be related to the food that you're consuming? As we heard earlier this morning, food that we put in our body is pivotal to how we live a long and healthy life. Not just a long and healthy life that we're just living as is, but a one that actually has the quality of life that goes with it. And over the long term, low quality foods put a strain on your body as well as your brain. Inflammation happens when our immune system becomes activated because your body is recognizing something that's foreign. There's a problem. So all of those like genetically modified things, the pesticides, the chemicals, the artificial flavors, the artificial colors, all of these things are foreign to our body. And our body starts to react to it like an invading microbe or a chemical. It literally is trying to attack it. Inflammatory foods are often the trigger, and they will start the inflammation process, but it'll also help to enhance any pre-existing conditions that you have, such as anxiety, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and we'll even go as far to say as things like Alzheimer's and dementia, just to name a few. Earlier, I mentioned to you, one of my friends, their children were actually having some attention problems, and her son actually is on the autism spectrum. And just by changing the foods, the change in behavior happened. And we're not talking about a cure, but there's a significant change in the behavior. And so this goes to pretty much everybody with all of those types of things that I was talking about before. Some of the things that we really need to start avoiding in order to help reduce inflammation. Later, we'll talk about anti-inflammatory foods specifically, but right now, let's talk about inflammatory foods. We talked about processed foods earlier. Refined carbohydrates, guys, that's your white bread, your white pastries, anything that has full-on white sugar in it. Anything that is actually like even white rice, that's more refined because it literally converts directly to sugars. It causes inflammation in our body. Fried foods. When I was pulling this list, they said French fries specifically, but I would say that it's not French fries. It is fried food. It's the actual oils that we're using to fry the foods. Because you can have really great French fries that you make at home in the oven that taste better than any takeout restaurant that you could possibly ever eat. So again, fried foods, it puts a lot of pressure on your body, on your heart, on your internal organs. Sodas. Guys, that soda aisle, I'm really sorry to tell you, but even the diet soda is not considered good for your body. It is filled with chemicals that are causing inflammation in your bodies, and even other sweetened beverages. So, when you're taking a look at juice, juice is actually pretty heavily processed, and there's a lot of sugar in there that it does not come from the natural fruit. And therefore, it is helping to cause that additional inflammation in your body. I'm sorry to tell you, but red meat, burgers, steaks, high in the inflammation category. And things like processed meat, our famous deli meats that we've been talking about, those hot dogs, the sausages, all of those things, they are contributing to the stress on your body when it comes to inflammation. And then finally, in that list, we're talking about things like margarine, shortening, lard. For years and years and years, people marketed things like margarine to be the thing that we need to be replacing, the fats in the butter and stuff like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is so filled with processed stuff that it's actually pretty bad. And remember when I was telling you before about the label of non-GMO? There's margarine now that says non-GMO margarine. That doesn't make it good. Okay. It really doesn't make it good for us. It actually is contributing to our, the inflammation in our bodies. Now, in order for me to continue, we're going to go to the next slide. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. I personally, I've gone through my food journey, and my food journey, couple of years ago, actually, I was in an inflammatory state. So I got sick. And I had to have a surgery. But before my body knew what the problem was, the inflammation started. So, our bodies are really, really good. They know how to protect us. And so I had a completely benign tumor that was found in my intestine, but we didn't know where it was in my body because my whole body swelled to try to get rid of the problem. It was trying to attack the problem. And on the other hand, the rest of the inflammation was trying to protect my other organs. So because of the pain that I was having, my body was trying to protect the body, and it was trying to protect the organs, causing inflammation. So now this is in the case of something serious, but imagine your body trying to do the same thing and, trying to locate the source of the pain when we have a whole bunch of different a chemical panoply in our body causing all of this disruption. Okay. So now we're going to continue and we're going to talk about our nervous system. And I want to talk about our nervous system and the immune system and how it works so that you can get a better idea of how it affects our mind and our body. We all have what we call an autonomic response system. Autonomic meaning it works automatically. We don't have to think about breathing to breathe. Our heart beats completely naturally. Our blood pressure auto-regulates. Our respiratory system, our blood circulates. We never have to think about any of those things happening naturally. So that autonomic immune system is broken down into two parts. So these other two parts are built to kind of protect us. They're what you call the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And so you've probably heard of the fight or flight response in relation to stress today, but let's think about it in relation to food a little bit and about what we're putting in our bodies. When we talked about how food reacts to the food, our body reacts to the food that we eat, well, this is an example of our sympathetic nervous system acting on your behalf to help to protect you from the foods that we're eating. So that stomach ache that you're having, that acid indigestion that you're having after eating something that it's just not sitting well with you, the sore knees after 24 hours after you've eaten that fried food, you have the sore pain from the arthritis that happens. Inflammation is meant to try to protect the organs from the invaders that we're talking about today. So that's why I wanted to lead in with that example about, inflammation trying to protect us. It is there to protect us. But the problem is that we are putting things in our body in a way that is not allowing us going into the parasympathetic mode. Now, our parasympathetic nervous system is that rest and digest system. So this is where we go from our little invaders. So the sympathetic nervous system, we have they're kind of our fighters in our body. They go around fighting things. They're like causing the inflammation because they're like, we're going to fix this. We're going to break it down and we're going to fix it all up again. Then we have that other little system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And their job is to come and repair all the damage that inflammation had caused for us to be able to heal. So for example, when we have swollen muscles, sore muscles from working out, that was inflammation caused by the activity. And then it goes into rest and digest mode. When we're continuously putting inflammatory foods into our bodies, we're not allowing our bodies to flow back into rest and digest mode. And it basically feels like we're fighting for our lives. This is where our increased risk comes from. I'm kind of a stress geek. This is my world, okay? This is what I deal with. And so, although we're talking about food, I want to talk about stress and in relation to your mood. We have spent all of our lives, most of us, waking up in the morning, rushing to work or rushing to get the kids out. We go to work. We are bombarded all day long with a lot of stresses that are happening in our day-to-day life. Then we come home from work, we prepare dinner. Then we want to work out because we are, we know it's good for us, right? So we're working out, we're doing all of those things. Basically, not only is the food that we're putting in our body causing that inflammation, but we are also causing that inflammation because we are living in the sympathetic response. We are living in fight or flight. We are never giving our bodies enough time to basically come down, even when we're working out. A lot of people that I've worked with, I personally myself, I suffered from a burnout 4 years ago now. And I thought I was doing everything right. I was doing the self-care. I was doing the food. I was doing the working out. I really thought I was doing it all right. But unfortunately, the way that we are living nowadays, it's not allowing us that enough time. We close our eyes at night and 8 hours later, we wake up and we do the same thing again. And so what is the foundation to all of this? Where can we start to fix this level of stress and this level of anxiety that we're living? It's with our food. We need to start by putting good food in our body. We need to nourish us. That's our foundation. When we build a house, we cannot build it on sand. We need to pour the concrete. And, this is exactly what we're doing right now. We're pouring the concrete for our future. By us starting to get into the habit of having nourishing foods in our bodies that are high in vitamins and minerals, that are not causing that additional stress on the body because we're putting chemicals in it, it's allowing us to slowly but surely allow our body to go back into rest and digest mode. Our food can be digested more easily, therefore it's putting less pressure on our internal body. And the connection to our gut and our mind is way bigger than you even thought. So with that said, we'll go to the next slide and we're going to talk about how food, how is food like a car? Okay, so let's talk about food as fuel. Have you ever thought about your brain as an expensive car? Probably not. Most people are looking at their brain. They think it's automatic. It happens, it's part of that autonomic response, right? If you haven't, we really need to clear this up. When you buy an expensive car, I don't know if this has happened to you, but they tell you that you got to put premium gas in there. Otherwise, all of the mechanisms inside of the car will eventually go bad over time before the warranty is up. And most of the time, an expensive car is meant to last a long time. And so therefore, if you treat it well, it will survive you the lifespan that it's meant to survive. So eating quality foods is kind of like putting the right level of premium gas in your body. You're getting the right vitamins, the right minerals, the antioxidants that actually nourish your brain, that helps to protect it from oxidative stress. And so oxidative stress is what we call the waste from free radicals that are produced when your body uses oxygen, which actually damages cells. Unfortunately, like a premium car, if we continue to put bad things in our body, our brains are affected and therefore our overall mood is affected. So it's not just affecting the brain in a way, but Vanessa, you said it really well earlier. A lot of people suffer from brain fog, forgetfulness. You're in the middle of doing something, you kind of lose track of what you're doing. All of these things are symptoms of the food grade that we're putting in our bodies. Bad food continues to put undue stress on the brain, therefore leading to mood disorders such as anxiety and depression. And again, like my example from before, the stress that we live every day, it's bad on our bodies. It's bad on our bodies and it's bad on our minds. And if we don't focus on it more as something that needs to happen at the foundation, this is actually where I start with all of my clients. Every single one of my clients, we always end up talking about food. It is not the thing that I don't start there because it's what I'm passionate about, because I'm actually passionate about stress, anxiety, and burnout. But I start there because if we do not build a foundation, we are never going to be able to put that roof on top. Heavily processed foods and refined sugars are the foods that we talked about earlier. Because they lead to inflammation, it's affecting your brain, it's affecting your body, and our body in turn is suffering. So we might be living longer lives, but honestly, guys, are we living really the quality of life in the longer years that we want to be? The answer is no, we are not, because we are not taking care of our bodies. So again, when our diet is comprised of low quality foods, you're lacking the ability for your body to create enough serotonin to help you to regulate the happy. So serotonin is that hormone in our bodies that is there to help us regulate sleep, our appetite. It helps to regulate our moods and inhibit pain. Pain, guys, inflammation and pain. There's something to be said there. Did you know 95% of our serotonin is produced in our gut? 95%. That is almost all of the serotonin. So now, if you are putting things in your gut that are not good, your body is not capable of producing the serotonin that it's required to basically help to regulate the neurotransmission of everything that's happening in your body. Okay, your fight or flight ends up going off. Your rest and digest doesn't exist anymore. And therefore, you're putting your body in this constant state of stress and inflammation. That brings me to the next topic and the next slide, our gut health. What is that? Okay. Gut health contains, you're basically, a healthy gut contains healthy bacteria and immune cells that ward off infectious agents like bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So it's called your microbiome. A healthy gut also communicates with your brain through the nerves, through the gut, and through the hormones, which are basically moving throughout your body to create general health and well-being. Now, I know you're reading it on your screen. You might be freaking out a little bit, but I think it's pretty interesting that we are roughly 40 trillion bacterial cells in our body, and there's only 30 trillion human cells, which means that you're more bacteria than human. So we need to treat those bacterial cells really well, because honestly, the more they deteriorate, the worse off we end up being. And so if our gut really takes over that amount of space in our body, how come we're not taking more care of it? How come we're not hearing more about how we need to take care of that gut health? What's more, there are more than 1,000 different species of bacteria that's in our human gut microbiome. And each of them plays a really different role in your body. Most of them are extremely important for your health, while others actually may cause disease. So like there's kind of a good balance of the good and the bad bacteria. Altogether, guys, your bacteria in your body weighs as much as anywhere between 2 and 5 pounds in your body. That's just bacteria, which is roughly the weight of your brain. So we have enough, there's like a direct correlation, bacteria, brain. The correlation is right there. They weigh the same thing. They're taking up the same amount of space in your body. And they're actually working to protect each other. They function as an extra organ in your body, and they play a role to your physical health, but as well as in your mental health. If, as I mentioned earlier, 95% of your serotonin is what creates you're happy, if your gut health is off, so are your moods. Okay. Secondly, our gut is connected to our brain by millions of nerve cells. These nerves are all talking to each other. So I kind of like briefed on it before. But if they're off, basically, what do you think that your brain is going to be telling you? Your brain is going to be sending you mixed signals. It's going to be giving you brain fog. It's going to be giving you forgetfulness. You might suffer from even more, a lot of seasonal depression, seasonal affectiveness disorder has to do with the fact that we're not regulating our bodies with the foods that we're eating when we're going into new seasons. We didn't talk about it, but eating seasonally is huge. We don't eat strawberries in the winter because they're not naturally produced, right? Like there's certain foods that we have more of in the winter than we do in the summer. And there's a reason why our bodies need to go through that kind of change, because the gut bacteria, it's all reflected. It all takes everything that's happening inside of us. Gut health, guys, is actually cultivated from the second that we're born. There are many things that contribute to our gut health, and there's also a lot of things that take away from our gut health. So in today's day and age, we are seeing more and more C-section births than vaginal births. And believe it or not, when we go through the natural birth canal, that is your first experience with basically gut microbiome. You're being nourished by your family, and the genetics that are created by your family. Other things like being breastfed, more and more we're seeing a lot more, of the convenience around. And don't get me wrong, totally support absolutely every decision that a person makes as a family. But these are also, like I said, they're contributing factors, right? If you have no choice in the way that things are happening, that's okay too. But we have to try to be able to give the best opportunity to ourselves and our bodies. Food's also on the list. So again, it's a foundation, but there are things that are more gut microbiome friendly than you would think. So one of the ones that I like to talk about, because we hear a lot about it, but it's like sauerkraut. What is sauerkraut? It's a fermented cabbage. People think fermented, like, ew, gross. It means that it's broken down. No, it's actually better for us because it actually creates its own natural probiotics. It's basically creating a kind of a microbiome of itself. And so a lot of the times people who eat fermented foods have less gastrointestinal problems because they're actually feeding foods to their guts that are actually a lot better for them. What is fermentation? So I kind of just talked about it a bit, but it's basically things like microorganisms, like yeast, that break down the foods and turn them into another product. So you can have things like sauerkraut, which is fermented cabbage, but you can also ferment things like carrots. You can ferment your drinks. Kombucha, super popular nowadays. It's basically the fruit sugars that are broken down and fermented and turned into this drink that's actually really good for our microbiome. Things like cultured milk, kefir milk, yogurts without the added sugar, guys. So a lot of the times Greek yogurts are really good because they're high in probiotic, and they're very low in sugar and higher in fats. Things like miso, it's a paste that's created out of either fermented tofu, fermented rice, but that's actually really good for bases of soups, and it's really good for our gut. Kimchi, tempeh, sauerkraut, again, just to name a few. Probiotics are also another significant source of a probiotic and your gut health. And so oftentimes you will hear people or doctors specifically, I know my doctor is very strong on it. If you have to be put on a round of antibiotics, for example, they will suggest taking probiotics because an antibiotic is exactly that. It's an antibacterial. It basically gets rid of all of the bacteria in your body. It gets rid of anything that is bacterial. Therefore, it is getting rid of all of that good, healthy gut microbiome that you have in your body. And so it's very important to replenish that when you're going through a series of antibiotic treatment. You can always ask your doctor, but I'm pretty sure that they'll recommend one or two of the different types that are out there that will actually help to support your body. And next, we are going to go into the next slide, which is going to bring us to specifically anti-inflammatory foods. Anti-inflammatory foods, there are tons of them out there. Obviously, we talked a little bit today about, eating fresh produce and stuff like that, but there are specific things that we actually have that are on that list as a specific anti-inflammatory for our bodies to be able to help to reduce the swelling that happens. There are also diets that are specifically formulated to actually help inflammation. So I know for a fact that I have a couple of my clients that I've actually worked with that we've done a temporary anti-inflammatory diet specifically just to be able to reduce the inflammation in their body, to figure out exactly where the source of all of the problems are coming from. Because as I mentioned earlier, when I got sick, we didn't know where the pain was, because my whole body was inflamed. I spent 10 days in the hospital with inflammation on all of my organs, and it wasn't those organs that were having problems. And so oftentimes when we're suffering from inflammation, it happens everywhere in our body. It's not just happening in one specific area. You might feel like you have shoulder pain and your knees are sore, and then you're going to have swollen, a swollen, distended belly. It feels like you have indigestion all the time. And oftentimes, you can't put your finger on just one thing. And so oftentimes we will go into an anti-inflammatory style diet to reduce the whole overall, to slowly but surely start picking up what it is in your body that is causing this outrage in the body. So foods like foods that target inflammation are things like blueberries, apples, kale. I never really liked kale before until I started making kale chips, and they were super really good. And then I started incorporating it elsewhere. But they're high in antioxidants and what we call polyphenols. They're compounds that are found in fruits and vegetables and plants, and basically they help us to stop our body going into overdrive, the stress response. So, when we talk about going back into that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest, by having foods that are high in these components, it's allowing our bodies to start the repairing process. If there's one thing that I can tell you today, if there's only one thing that you took from this today, take it and run with it. Make it be that one thing that you're going to go and incorporate in your life. Things like tomatoes and nuts, fatty fish. I will even challenge that by saying that there are other types of fatty foods, things like avocados, that we can put in our bodies. There are supplements that we can take. But essentially, at the end of the day, let's build a good foundation with the foods. I wouldn't suggest only eating those types of foods. I think that we can, as long as we're bringing in a lot of really good fruits, vegetables, and unprocessed foods into our bodies, we're automatically going to get a huge, huge, huge advantage to reducing the inflammation. And then in reducing the inflammation, we're going to be reducing the stress. Our mood, again, it really all comes down to our gut. And so if we take all of the things that we've learned from the beginning of our presentation today and we start putting them together, it's like a puzzle. We started with one small piece, and slowly but surely we've been putting this puzzle together and figuring out that everything that we put inside of our body, it affects the mind and the body. It's all connected. Many doctors used to think that the mind wasn't connected to the gut, but now doctors are coming back and saying that no, they're completely connected. And the foods that we eat are really playing a pivotal role. So again, by reducing the genetic material, the non-GMO foods in our bodies, by increasing the opportunity to include organics in there, to picking and choosing the types of processed foods that we're putting in our bodies, we are giving our body the opportunity to go into that rest and digest. And then once we have that foundation, the rest is all in our hands. It gives us the opportunity to work on those added stresses that are coming from external factors that have nothing to do with the food. But without that, it's kind of like you're running uphill to a hill that has no summit. So again, the foundation is super important. And again, small steps, big wins, guys. Every small step that you take in the right direction is going to be the right one for you. The foods that we choose affect our mood. And if all of this is to say, food is medicine. It is our first medicine. Before we've ever gone to a doctor, before doctors ever existed, food was the foundation of our health. It can help us to live longer. It can help us to live more healthy lives, and it can give us the mood to go with it. With all of the opportunities that we've had today to make these small steps, I really hope that they will have an impact on your lives and the impact on the lives of the people that you love. Because again, like I mentioned before, when you take a step in the direction of taking care of your health, that's giving you the opportunity to be able to transfer that addiction to the rest of the people in your family. And even if you only incorporate one thing into your lifestyle today, that is going to be just one more thing in the right direction to having a better life. So thank you very much. And I believe that concludes this part of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I find this so fascinating. I've actually read a couple of books about it, and I have seen people who have done research, and they have tied things like crime levels and violence to food deserts in certain neighborhoods where they don't have access to good quality food, and why people aren't sort of looking at this link, that sort of constant fight or flight that you were discussing and mentioning over and over. When people are living in this state, it has massive impact on not just them and not even just their family, but like society at large. So I think this conversation is so important, and people, need to think about it a bit. Again, don't run out and eat only yogurt. That's not going to solve your
No,
problem.
no.
That's not the solution to crime. That's not what I'm saying. But to think about some of these things. One of these questions came in. This is so interesting, and I've seen so many debates on this. Coconut oil, yes or no? And fat, actually, further than that, fats in general. You alluded to it, but the sort of ideas around fats have changed so much in the last couple of years. Maybe you can talk about that. Using coconut oil is probably the easiest example.
Yeah, so coconut oil, there is actually, there's a lot of research on both sides. I will definitely say that coconut oil for me is something that I do incorporate in my lifestyle. So I don't use it to full on fry foods, but sometimes I will use it as a base instead of an olive oil if I have foods that have a higher cooking temperature. So I personally see the benefit in it and having that added to my personal lifestyle. But again, for each person, it's very different, right? We're all bio-individual people. And so again, everything that I've said today will not work for everybody. I hate the word diet. I talked about diets twice today. We talked about the anti-inflammatory diet, and I think I talked about another diet. I don't remember if it was another conversation, but I don't like the word diet because essentially at the end of the day, it's something that we're doing temporarily. I like to really think of this as a lifestyle. And when you make a choice to have a healthy lifestyle, you need to incorporate a good balance of foods. So healthy fats. Fat is not bad for you. Believe it or not, things that are low fat.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah. Low fat, it's everywhere. Look at the sugar content in there, guys. Your sugar content is out the roof because they were removing all of the nutritional components around what it is that you're eating. I'm not saying to go and eat full fat everything, but when you're having a salad and you have some nuts in there, maybe some avocado in there, your fruits and your vegetables and all of those really cool things that you're putting in there, you're creating a well-rounded meal. Low fat does not mean healthy, and fats you shouldn't be running away from them. They should be something that you're incorporating in a healthy way into your diet. I could talk all day about this, but even carbs, I spent years on this low carb diet because that's the way that there's nothing out there that says that you need to be low carb. But guess what? All of the carbs that I was eliminating from my diet were carbs from refined sugars. They were all the white breads, the white pastas, the white rice, all of those things that are highly processed. At the end of the day, once I started incorporating things like sweet potatoes and red potatoes and, whole grain rice and quinoa, those are all carbs. You can eat that all day, every day, and not gain an ounce, if you're eating it in the right context, So yeah, it's really, I hate the word diet. I hate putting stigma to it, but we need to have a good balance of the foods that we're eating. And fat is not bad. Neither are carbs, and neither are proteins. Like, we need fat, carbs, and proteins to be able to have a whole, full meal.
Yeah, I've actually seen quite a well-known nutritionist, and he's sort of starting a movement that we stop calling fats because he's like, people think this is what makes them fat. This is not what makes you fat. Now, there are, of course, exceptions, as Crystal said. If you're a cardio patient or you have a cardiology issue, yeah. I mean, you have to be careful. But for most people, healthy fats are really important. They really help you. And another question has come in. Yeah, natural peanut butter and almond butter. Is this something that's good?
Yeah. So this is really funny. I love this because I follow somebody on social media. Her name is the Food Babe. So you guys can look her up. She's a pioneer when it comes to destroying companies that put bad stuff in their foods. Okay, so the Food Babe, you got to follow her, you got to find her. But she posted a really good article the other day. 3 different almond butters, exact same front label. They look literally 99% identical. The first one was brand X, same brand. They were all 3. This one over here was almond butter. Inside there, whole bunch of ingredients, tons of ingredients. They were not GMO. They were not. They were GMO. They didn't have the organic label. Same other one had the organic, non-GMO label on it. It looked exactly the same. And then the third one was non-GMO, organic, and the ingredients list had almonds. Okay.
There's your
The other
winner.
two, there's your winner. Okay. It's crazy, but you have to learn how to read your labels. Okay. And so peanut butter, I have great peanut butter in my kitchen, but believe it or not, most peanut butter has powdered sugar as their first ingredient before peanuts. Powdered sugar, ew, like that's pretty bad. Like if it's the
Yeah.
first ingredient, chances are it's because the first ingredient means that it is the most of what's in the package. So if your first ingredient is sugar and your last ingredient is peanuts, there's something wrong. Okay. So again, reading your labels and learning how to read them is super important. So peanut butter versus almond butter, I think that they're all really good. I think that you have to, again, pick and choose the ones that you're going to want to incorporate into your life. And, you know, it might not be the Skippy that we choose. It might not be any of the brands that we're used to. Believe it or not, I have found some really amazing no-name brands that are 100 times better than some of the organic non-GMO stuff. So again, learning how to read them, very important.
This is really interesting. Somebody wrote in asking if you could talk about the role of water and dehydration and the role that it plays in sort of health and how it impacts you.
Wow, that's a really big one. Speaking of me being completely dehydrated after talking for 2 hours, guys, water is a huge one in our body. So there is such thing as water overdosing. So I want everybody to remember that each person is very different, very different. But we release about 2 liters of water a day from our bodies, and we actually ingest almost the same amount in water based on the foods that we eat. Okay. So there's water in our vegetables and stuff like that. So if we're eating a pretty decent balance, we're actually getting a pretty decent amount of water in our day. Most of us are not drinking enough water based on our own physical activity. So somebody who is extremely sedentary is not going to need the same amount of water as somebody that is, you know, very, very active. For example, if I work out for an hour, I have a 1 liter bottle that I go through in that 1 hour. Whereas, you know, some people might not go through that in 3 hours. But having water in your body, and we're not talking about coffee. We're not talking about teas. We're not talking about juices. We are talking about plain old water. If you're not getting enough of it, it actually plays it puts a significant stress on your body because it's constantly searching inside of us to go and get that nutrient that it's requiring. Also, we need it to help to flush the body. So similarly to fiber in our body is good because it helps to flush. Well, so is the water. The water coming into our body, it's flushing out our organs, it's cleaning up our kidney, it's helping to clean up our kidneys, and it's helping to flush all of those toxins in our body. So again, there are some calculations off the top of my head. I don't have them, but there are calculations to do based on your body weight and how much activity that you have. But again, you should never feel thirsty. Like right now, I feel thirsty, but you should never really feel thirsty. That's a signal of dehydration. It's not even a signal that you're just thirsty. So when you feel that dehydration in your body, it's because you actually need a lot more water to be able to get it in there.
This is a really cool question, actually. And I think it speaks to, you were talking earlier about, you were encouraging people to sort of try making things at home for yourself. So someone has written in and said, I love chocolate. We hear you, we are with you. And they say, I'm thinking of making it myself, but all the recipes call for cocoa butter. Is that a healthy ingredient if you suffer from fatty liver disease? Or, I mean, even in general, is cocoa butter something, I mean, I guess healthy? We'll use healthy in air quotes.
We're going to go healthy in air quotes. Here's the thing. One, I can't give medical advice because I am not a doctor. I have my certification comes with like the nutritional school that I did. So I do want to be careful there that I'm not giving out any kind of medical advice. One, you should always talk to your doctor about anything that you're going to be doing in your life that could possibly be, you know, affecting any medical health issues that you had. Similar to what you said before, if you have heart disease, you're going to want to be careful about the type of cholesterol that you're putting in your body, right? Everybody is really different. I would say you need to try to make the chocolate. I think that you need to try to make the chocolate. And there are ways to even if you don't, so for example, you can use cocoa nibs. Cocoa nibs, you can buy the cocoa nibs, you can melt it down. You could add some cool things in there. Dark chocolate is actually really good for you. And obviously, you can sweeten it up the way that you want to. So if you get a higher content in chocolate, like for example, 90% or 95%, it's very bitter chocolate. But while you're making it, you can maybe use something like maple syrup to sweeten, or, unprocessed, unfiltered honey. That's also a really great way to do things. Adding fruit to the sugar, adding fruit to the chocolate. And so I'm not going to talk about cocoa butter per se, because honestly, I don't have the answer to that one. But what I will say is make the chocolate. Enjoy making the chocolate, and everything within reason, right? Again, 80-20. I'm not asking, I would not suggest eating chocolate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But if you're going to have a piece of chocolate at the end of your day, because that's what gives you pleasure, that one piece of chocolate is probably 2% of your day. So
yeah, and what you had said before about if you make it yourself, at least you know what's in it.
Exactly.
You don't have to worry about the labels and what's in that, this and that. You know what you did.
And be okay with getting it wrong. Okay, this is one thing. People are so intimidated by trying things. Okay, I cannot tell you how many times I've made a dinner that literally failed, and it tasted like dirt. But did I give up? No, I didn't give up. I made something else that night. We moved on from it and we tried things again. So maybe the first time that you make your chocolate, I know my husband tried to make healthy nut bars, and he tried so many different ways. And yes, it costs money to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, we know where they're coming from. So we might spend a little bit more money to make them now, but we're going to have them in the freezer ready to take out. Those healthy, convenient, quick things that we want, that we usually go to processed food for. If we have them at home and they're already there for us, you're going to feel so much better.
Yeah, and I would like an update on how the chocolate making goes.
Oh, yes.
I would like, because I love this idea.
Please send Vanessa an email following that.
please send us a chocolate update.
And you guys can
share it with everybody.
Yeah, or follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Like, I don't know if I even put any of my information, but it's really easy to find me. Crystal Baran. You can find me anywhere. Follow me and ask me questions.
This is an interesting question, actually. If your nervous system is automatic, then why would it not be working to repair the damage that's being caused? I guess they mean like by the food that you're eating, or environmental, or what have you.
That is a great question. And I think maybe we could have spent maybe a couple more minutes on there. And yes, automatic means it's meant to go on autopilot. But the problem is that we're not giving it a chance to do its two parts. That system where we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, they work in conjunction with each other. And they it's not a balance, because nothing in life is really balanced. Everything is kind of on the extreme on both sides. And so if your sympathetic nervous system is working to fight, if it can never calm down, it causes an unbalance in the rest of the system. So the moment it feels like it can start to relax, we're putting something foreign back into our body. And so therefore it goes back up again. And our parasympathetic nervous system never has the chance to basically go in and do the repairing. So until you're able to have a good balance, and you start foundationally with the foods that you're eating, by getting rid of some of the toxic chemicals that are putting in your body, believe it or not, yes, we are automatic, but we are putting foreign substances. You've never heard of a caveman going through these issues. They did not have the health issues. Yes, they died younger because of the fact that like they were being chased by saber-toothed tigers. We're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers. We're living lives that are actually really, really privileged at this point. And but we're taking that privilege and we're putting a very, very physical strain on our bodies. And so going back to that caveman thing, I think I have a couple minutes left. But when we talk about stress, I always love to talk about caveman days, because in caveman days, there were only really two reasons why we would suffer from stress. One, we didn't have food, okay? Or two, we were running for our lives, okay? No food, running
dinosaurs.
for our lives. literally, or running from that saber-tooth tiger, or we're trying to kill a saber-tooth tiger, or whatever it is. The other thing when we talk about caveman days, people have this weird preconceived notion that they were eating meat all the time. They were not eating meat all the time. Believe it or not, they ate fruits, they ate vegetables, they found anything that they can forage, because finding meat and killing animals was actually a very difficult task. Have you ever tried to kill an animal yourself? Like, I don't think any of us have had to do that on a regular basis. There's probably people that have done it, and that's okay, but it's not part of our natural habitat. We get things given to us now. And so if in those days, we only had those two things that were causing us these levels of stress on our body, the rest of the time, our bodies were in parasympathetic mode. They were in rest and digest. We were fully fed. We were feeling good. We were taking care of our family. Everybody was protected, and we were living our best lives. We're not doing that now. We're basically putting foreign chemicals inside of our body every day. We're putting creams on our bodies, fragrances on our bodies. Like fragrance, again, it's perfumes. You hear about it all the time. It's an endocrine disruptor. It disrupts our autonomic response system. And so it cannot start to repair itself if it's constantly being shaken up like this. If you're constantly running from the saber-tooth tiger, eventually you can't run anymore.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm going to wrap up on one question because I think it's really interesting, and it's certainly at the top of almost all conversations about nutrition lately. This person wrote in to ask about milk versus almond milk, but really to the bigger conversation, dairy, vegan, the plant-based movement is a huge thing we're seeing lately. Can you talk just quickly about that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. And I kind of insinuated that I kind of started my own journey in that. I wouldn't call myself a vegetarian, but I would definitely call myself plant-based. And the reason why I've chosen to take those steps is because there is a non-sustainable way of life when it comes to animal products. We are, there's so much research out there. I welcome you guys to go take a look at some of those documentaries that I've talked about, The Need to Grow. There's Cowspiracy, the new one that just came out called Seaspiracy. We are not living in a sustainable way to support the environment and our lives. And again, back to the caveman days, we were meant to be eating and foraging and eating fruits and vegetables and things that come from the land. And when we did have meat in our body, it was something that was almost considered a treat or a privilege. It was helping us to grow. But if our animals are being treated the same way that some of the plants are being treated by eating genetically modified foods, you're putting genetically modified foods inside the animals. The animals are eating it, they're processing it. The same thing is happening to their body, and then we are putting that into our body. There's something to be said about it. And, if we don't stop consuming the way we consume, our planet is not going to last. So again, small steps in the right direction. I can't say that I'm never going to be vegan, because I couldn't say that I would ever be vegetarian. And I couldn't say that I would ever be plant-based, because let me tell you, my whole life revolved around, having that meat at the dinner table. But once I've started to make the shift and really seeing what it's doing to our environment, but not only to our environment, to our bodies. Why are we drinking animal milk? We stopped drinking our mother's milk at about 1 year, 2 years old. What does it do for us, really? I mean, I make my oatmeal with water or with almond milk. I've never really made it with milk. Like there's so many different alternatives, right? And there are tons of things that are, and if we're starting to get the good vitamins and minerals in our body, we don't need that glass of milk for the calcium or the vitamin D, because you're getting calcium and vitamin D from everything else you're eating.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right. I mean, I feel like we could do this for
at least
another hour just on chocolate alone.
I mean, I love the Q&A portion, honestly, because it's so much fun to be able to have that interaction. But I know we could do this all day long.
Yeah, but what I will ask before we go is maybe, Crystal, you mentioned a few resources throughout the presentations.
Yeah.
Are there any other, we had some people ask about like possible research they should be looking at that backs up why fruits and vegetables are so important. Can you maybe just mention a couple of websites people should check out if this is of interest to them, people to follow in social media? That would be really great.
Okay, so I didn't think of this in advance, so that's a really good question. I know I mentioned a couple of them. The EWG, the Environmental Working Group, this is a really good one because there's plenty of information and it comes from multiple sources. And they're not nonprofit, they're not for profit. They are really out there. They don't work with the they don't work with the industrial agriculture to create the things that are specifically, geared towards saying that it's good or it's bad. It's a very third party independent review. I would say Dr. Hyman, Dr. Mark Hyman, who is a doctor that specializes in food as medicine. He's a really good one to follow. Any books that you have over there. Dr. Andrew Weil, he is the founder of integrative medicine. And so, we hear a lot about doctors, prescribing medications for people. Dr. Andrew Weil will prescribe food before he prescribes medicine, right? The change in our lifestyle is really what's gonna set us apart for the health that we have to move forward. So those are two doctors that I absolutely love, that I follow on social media. There's the Food Babe. She's again a pioneer when it comes to basically killing the food industry and really tearing them apart because I mentioned it briefly, but Europe has over 2,000 ingredients that are not allowed to be used in any kind of product that is put out on the market. In the United States, there's a fraction of that. And in Canada, we kind of have a tendency of following a bit of both. And so, learning about the things that you're putting in your body, the Food Babe is a good one. You can also follow me. I give a lot of information out there. I have a lot of free content on my social media pages. I do a lot of videos. I do a lot of things like this also. Watch those documentaries, The Need to Grow. I keep saying that one because it really stuck in my mind. There's a few others on Netflix. If you take a look at documentaries about food, I would suggest taking a look at those and just learning more about the foods that you're putting in your body, and then make educated decisions. Don't make decisions because trust me, if you watch Seaspiracy, the new one, you're going to be like, I don't want to eat fish ever again. And that's not where we're going. Again, go small. Let's educate ourselves. Let's learn about how sustainability happens. Let's learn about the foods that we're putting in our body, one small step at a time.
That's great. Thank you so much, Crystal. And thank you to everybody who took the time this morning to join us. We are going to be sending you a recording of this webinar. Please share it with people you think might want to learn more about this. I really encourage you to check out some of those doctors and websites that Crystal was talking about. It's a really fascinating field. It changes so quickly. We are learning a lot. What we thought was true, the whole low fat movement, maybe 20 years ago, everybody was eating, sugar-free frozen yogurt stuff. And now we're realizing actually you need fats. I mean, it's really, really interesting. So Crystal, thank you so much. This was really, I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did. And it was a real pleasure.
Thank you so very much for having me. This was a pleasure for me to do. I adored it. Thank you. It was great to meet you guys. And thank you everybody for joining.
All right, everyone. Have a good day.